Now let's talk about the vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz, Kamala's VP candidate. He's been accused of lying again. Walz has already stretched the truth, and that's putting it kindly, on his military service, his wife's fertility journey. Is now being accused of claiming awards he never received. A 2006 letter from the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce has resurfaced, reprimanding the then congressional hopeful Walz for claiming on his website that he had received an award from them in 1993 for his work with the business community. The letter is fairly strongly worded. It reads, "We researched this matter and confirmed that you have not been the recipient of any award from the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce. I'm not going to draw a conclusion about your intentions by including this line in your biography. However, we respectfully request that you remove any reference to our organisation, as it could be considered an endorsement of your candidacy." Geez, from the DUI lies to the tampons in boys' bathrooms to stolen valour. I mean, this guy is a bit of a disaster, isn't he?
Yeah, he really is. And, when you consider how Tim Walz progressed, I guess would be a polite way of putting it. I guess Barack Obama would call it evolved. When you look at Tim Walz's evolution from when he was a congressman representing Minnesota to his time as governor, you see how dishonest this man is. And I say that because when Tim Walz first ran for Congress, it was back in 2006, which was a difficult cycle for many Democrats, and he was running actually in a Republican-leaning district. He actually took many right-of-center positions. He stood for relative fiscal sanity. Actually, I mean, this is the guy who now is saying that one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Back then, he was preaching fiscal sanity. He actually even garnered an NRA endorsement. He was a defender of the Second Amendment, of your right to keep and bear arms. He spoke at APAC conferences. He was a reliable supporter of U.S.-Israel relations. I mean, I could go down the line here. But then when he got into the governor's mansion in Minnesota, everything changed. He became the single greatest banner of the flames, frankly, of the George Floyd riots of 2020. I mean, those riots started in his own backyard. He abetted them. He set up a COVID snitch hotline to rat out your neighbors if you were so much as congregating outside there. I mean, the guy just went from a centrist Democrat to a hard laugh socialist loon bag. And the fact that he was so dishonest, I guess, in retrospect, when he was representing Minnesota in Congress for 12 years. I mean, you look here at these statements from the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce, it kind of all makes sense. But, Rita, hearing that quote there, and it's a rather funny quote, actually, from the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce. Here in the United States, I guess the equivalent expression of what they're trying to say, at least in the southern U.S., would be "bless your heart," which is a very, shall we say, kind way of giving someone the middle finger.
Yes, it sounds polite, but it's not. Trump may have got the endorsements of Robert F. Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard, but I think the most powerful endorsement he has in recent days is this, because many establishment Republican figures, the rhinos as they're known, Republicans in name only, are throwing their support behind Kamala Harris. There's around 200 former staffers of President George Bush, George W. Bush, and Senator John McCain and Mitt Romney backing Kamala. And I think this is wonderful news for the Trump campaign. I wouldn't be surprised if this makes his next ad.
Yeah, I mean, this actually is really exactly what I was talking about just a few minutes ago. I mean, how the parties have switched over the past 15, 20 years or so. I mean, back then, the Republicans were really the party of these neoconservative boondoggles. They were the party of laissez-faire fundamentalism when it came to so-called free trade with our geopolitical foes, such as China. And back then, at least the economically populist, bordering on socialist wing of the Democratic Party purported to stand against those things. They were against wars. They were against free trade absolutism. They supported economic nationalism. And, I'm simplifying a little bit here, but 15, 20 years later, the script seriously has changed there. So, I mean, I'm not particularly surprised that a lot of these flunkies, the people that failed us in Iraq and Afghanistan, that had the wrong idea, the people that had this idea that admitting China to the World Trade Organization on a most favored nation status with the United States, the people that thought that would somehow end up as a good deal for the United States taxpayer, for the United States worker in the Rust Belt, the people that thought that that would be a good idea to give our arch geopolitical foe the very rope with which to hang ourselves. I'm not surprised that these bunch of bumbling idiots are now endorsing the Democratic Party, because the party of Donald Trump and the current Republican Party has moved in a very different direction. I am happy with that, and I am frankly happy that they are not happy with that.
Now, Josh, Facebook is claiming that it made an error, an innocent error, when it removed a page critical of cultural Marxism. This was a page connected to conservative liberal arts college Hillsdale. But these mistakes are happening way too often, often near an election, and it always seems to be in the same direction. They claim it was just taken down in error, it's been restored, but I'm a little bit dubious of that because I see this over and over again. And as I said, it seems to be these mistakes are only ever made against conservatives.
Yeah, it's tough to say what's happening in Meta right now. Mark Zuckerberg is actually giving us very mixed signals. So it was actually, less than 24 hours ago that he sent a very interesting letter, Rita. I actually just saw this letter just an hour or two before I hopped on with you. And in this letter that Mark Zuckerberg wrote to Congressman Jim Jordan, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, the strong conservative from Ohio, in this letter, Mark Zuckerberg actually, one, admits that the Biden administration was coercing Facebook to censor COVID-related speech. And then he says that he regrets not speaking up in hindsight because the government's trying to censor Facebook is actually wrong. So he's trying to do a bit of an about face here. And I also note that after the near Trump assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania last month, I also note that Zuckerberg had an interview where he said that Donald Trump came off looking like a total badass, frankly. So, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what Zuckerberg is thinking these days. He's giving us very mixed signals here, to be honest with you. What I do know is that I have long been of the opinion that we need something closely approximating common carrier regulation, the same way that your cell phone is regulated and you can't censor on the basis of content there. That is the way it should be for the social media platforms as well.
And I think that's precisely what he's terrified of, and why he can read polls as well as the next person, despite Kamala's resurgence. I think he's expecting a second Trump term.